Auth66, day 34, officially, sorry, I got a hair in my face, officially over the hump, whatever. So I think in one of my earlier videos I talked about operations and just kind of how I see that role. And I think, you know, I've talked about how it can be a little different depending on where you work and the size of your MSP and in general, the values that you hold. But one of the things that I was working on today that I really wanted to highlight was just some of the numbers that we track, some of the data that we track. Switching our ticketing system meant that we've had to reevaluate how we get those numbers and adjust for the differences. But I realize, you know, after talking to other MSPs, not everybody tracks the same things, and that it's important maybe to highlight some of the stuff that you're tracking, or in this case, what we're tracking, in order to just kind of share and encourage other people to make sure that they're doing the things they need to do to be profitable. Because, well, a good business, you know, wants to deliver a good service and you want to make sure there's a quality behind what you're doing. You also want the profitability. Profitability allows for that quality because it means that you can hire the right people. It means that you can, you know, staff appropriately, so you have enough people. And it also means that you're able to put aside for a rainy day so that not every, you know, change of wind can affect the business in a negative way. And so one of the things that I was going to highlight today is that tracking that should be done on a recording should be done on a monthly level, but it should be looked at least quarterly, about what you're putting into your agreements. So everybody prices their agreements differently, includes different things, but realistically, I guess maybe it'd be wrong to say industry standard, but the going notion is whether you track per user or per endpoint, you should have an understanding of how much time it takes to support that number. So I'm going to make up numbers. If you have a support cost of 1 hour per month that you would imagine for each computer, you feasibly could do 1 hour worth of service, whether that be through maintenance, whether that be through a customer calling in, just again, depending on how you structure your agreements, what's included. If you had, you know that that's the cost, and you know that your hourly rate is $150 an hour, then you're going to be at $150 for each one of those endpoints. And when you price it like that, you're saying, I assume I'm going to have 1 hour. Now, if you're good and you have an incentive to be good, because then you get to keep more money, you're going to make sure that that endpoint doesn't need support, right? You're going to do the things you need to do to make the environment optimal. That's the benefit for the customer. And the benefit for you as a business is in doing those things to make sure that your, you know, help desk hours are low and you're keeping the profitability. But if you don't track that, you know, you're also not keeping track of what other metrics might be affecting the overall, I would say, relationship with the customer. I'll give you a couple of examples. So if you knew that your ratio of them using you was low, and you just patted yourself on the back and said, oh, that's great, like we're super profitable, you know, they're not using very much of our services, and, you know, we're keeping them in tip-top shape. But you need to be thinking about asking yourself, like, is that true? Like, just be critical about it. Is it true that we're actually keeping them in tip-top shape, or they maybe stop calling because they don't trust us to fix it anymore, or they're not engaging with us, they're using somebody else, right? Which can happen. Somebody in-house gets the idea, you know, that they can do more than they probably should be doing, and they might start taking those things on because they're frustrated with your response times. The numbers should be just one part of it, right? You should always have a counterbalance to things. But the reality is, though, it's the first red flag. It's the first red flag that means that you should look into everything else. So if, you know, utilization is low, you look at the last few quarterly meetings that you've had with them and see, you know, how have those gone? Oh, they haven't engaged. That's a contract problem, right? It could be that they have engaged. And when you engage, you find out that there is this person who's performing some level of shadow IT. And then that's a different conversation, right? And then sometimes it is just that you have set up the environment that way, and it is beneficial. I think it's a good time to consider what else could we be doing for that client, right? You have a couple of months of super profitability and you go, wait a second, maybe we could, propose doing a little something and at no charge just to be able to help deliver that value. Maybe we schedule an on-site for something that could be done remotely just to make sure that they feel that connection with us still, that we're still building that rapport, because the ultimate goal for every business is to make sure that you're delivering value for the price that you're charging. And I don't want to say like that we're perfect about it, because I know there's lots of room for us to improve, but we have used these metrics, and we do plan on using these metrics to kind of indicate when these flags exist so that we can respond appropriately. I think that we could probably talk for the rest of my Auth66s on all the different data that we track. But tracking, your delta that exists and what you planned on supporting versus, what actually exists. Like on the reverse side, if somebody's overutilizing you, it could be a case of there's something in the environment that needs to be replaced. It could be a good indicator of a project that needs to be done. Maybe there's something going on with their infrastructure that wasn't set up properly. You inherited something and a remediation project might be needed. There could be a misunderstanding on the client side about what is included and what's not included. And in that case, sometimes you'll find that technicians are also supporting things that they shouldn't be supporting or that should be billable. They're all just red flags. And I think like there's like a happy medium where, you're not going to hit it exactly, but where if you could hit within a certain band, then things are probably ticking along okay. And then you look at all the ones that are outside of that. Now, when you start using these numbers too, you can start paying attention to, wait a second, it's actually costing us more to support. So then when you're phasing in price increases, when you're phasing in contract renewals, you have a different conversation. You have numbers and data to back up what you're saying. We've had situations with a client where we've said like, yeah, so we set this contract up on the premise that you might use 10 hours a month. And here's the ticket data to show that you're using, 20 hours, which is double, which is difficult for us to be able to maintain profitability and guarantee, the service that you're looking to receive. So in that case there, we then turn around and go, when we negotiate, we're saying, I'm not just raising your price arbitrarily, I'm raising your price because you're using us. Obviously there's value. Or maybe we don't raise your price, but maybe this project that is a billable service would help reduce some of that noise. And if we reduce that noise, then we don't have to worry about, increasing the project or increasing the contract price. Whatever the lever may be that we'd have to pull, tracking those numbers is imperative, because ultimately every business needs to make a profit. And it doesn't matter what kind of business it is that you run. I mean, I'm using these numbers because they're what applies to an MSP, but that profitability in general, the service that you deliver, that's true for each one. When I would do weddings, I would turn around and look at my entire software stack, so to speak, that I would use, the personalized websites software, just different things that I would use, and I would take those costs and split it out over the amount of weddings I expected to book. And then I would turn around and say that was like beyond an hourly rate. That was like a built-in cost for each wedding. It was just there. And then there was an hourly rate that it would exist, assuming that I would have to bring an assistant and assuming that for every hour I shot, there would be this many hours of editing. And I wasn't going to turn around and build a price that said to the client, okay, I want you to pay for the editing as well as the time photographing, because realistically then would I not have an incentive to make every picture absolutely perfect and spend the most amount of time editing and doing things that maybe the client wouldn't value? Yeah. So, wouldn't really be able to match the costs in that way. So I would have an all-in rate, and that would give me the incentive to turn around and make sure that I photograph things correctly, well exposed, and do what I needed to do. And then for the client, they understood what the rate was going to be from the very beginning, and there was, everything was included, so it was a win-win in that regard. So I think tracking those numbers was also really good for me when I was doing that business, because I would go, okay, how profitable was I based on how much time I actually ended up putting into it. This is why I always say that skills are transferable, because the operations side of my brain works the same way between the two businesses. It's just the application is different, and the numbers that you track, or how you track them maybe, is different, but it's still all the same. Anyway, that's the longest one I've done in a little bit, but I'm probably going to talk a little bit more about metrics. So if you're interested, I'll see you later.